Thomas Jefferson once referred to the Constitution as the ark of our safety. As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the days leading up to the return of the Messiah. The floods are coming. The Lord will soon shut the door. It is now time to board the ark. This episode is entitled Thomas Jefferson's Interpretation of Astronomy in the Bible. Stay tuned as we discuss what God has revealed about His creation. All right, welcome to the Ark of Our Safety. My name is Brad Fields, and I will be your captain for this episode. So Thomas Jefferson read the Bible. He was a student of the Bible. That may sound completely different from what most of the world knows about Thomas Jefferson. Now, it is true that there are things that Thomas Jefferson said later on in life that suggest a change in his views of Christianity, his views of the Bible, but it is clear that he was a Christian. The guy believed in God. He believed in a creator. Thomas Jefferson, he studied. That's all he did. He studied for about 15, 16 hours a day, most likely, and then wrote letters about it. And he would talk about ideas. And so he was incredibly well educated. And so spending a lifetime, moral philosophers, he knew people that I didn't even knew existed until I started reading it. But this is page 203 of the American Story. And this is what Jefferson contemplating publishing a personal work to document his findings. Okay, and this is his findings on kind of the morality, kind of what is everybody saying about morality? What is the right way to live? And he says this: I should first take a general view of the moral doctrines of the most remarkable of the ancient philosophers, of whose ethics we have sufficient information to make an estimate. Okay, this is what he said about the moral teachings of Jesus when comparing it to all of the philosophers that he read. He said, Jesus alone pushed his scrutinies into the heart of man, erected his tribunal in the region of his thoughts, and purified the waters at the fountainhead. Okay, so after reading all the philosophers, he says, Jesus is the one that was able to get his doctrines actually into the heart of man, and that it made more of a change, more of an impact than any other philosopher that we have seen. Okay, so now I'm going to continue what he was saying. Say Pythagoras, Epicurus, Epictetus, Socrates, Cicero, Seneca, and Antinous, I should do justice to the branches of morality they have treated well. Okay, so there's other people that understand the importance of morality. He's giving that benefit to them. But point out the importance of those in which they are deficient. Okay, so he is recognizing that, other people can have ideas on morality, but, there's deficiencies in those morality. There's a lot of things that are lacking. So here he goes. I should proceed to view of the life, character, and doctrines of Jesus. His system of morality was the most benevolent and sublime, probably, that has been ever taught, and consequently more perfect than those of any of the ancient philosophers. Okay, so that's pretty strong language. I would say that the statement probably is probably the most problematic. Because, okay, are you speaking with boldness, or what are you talking about? But he clearly says that that the teachings of Jesus are more perfect and more sublime than any of the ancient philosophers. Okay, and this is impactful because Jefferson eventually went on to compile a work entitled the quote benevolent and sublime teachings of Jesus for his personal use. Titled it The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth. And in it he included 81 moral teachings of Jesus. Okay, so he went through the New Testament, the Gospels, and he came up with 81 moral teachings of Jesus. And these are things that he actually would encourage other people to adopt into their behavior. In 1895, Congress purchased Jefferson's original manuscript from his great-granddaughter. And in 1902, the U.S. Congress published it for use by the nation's federal senators and representatives. Okay, so in 1902, the government bought Thomas Jefferson's personal or original manuscript of the teachings of Jesus, of the 81 morals of the teachings of Jesus. And then what did they do with that? They printed 9,000 copies at the government expense. And for the next 50 years, so all the way to 1952, they gave it out to every senator and representative, a copy of Jefferson's life and morals of Jesus at his or her swearing in. I'm done, folks. It's time to go home. I mean, that right there is just absolutely... Where was that? When were they going to teach? When were the schools going to teach me that? I went through the public education system for 12 years. Never heard such a thing. Never heard such a thing. Another thing about Thomas Jefferson is when he was president of the United States, before he was president of the United States, when he was vice president, House of Representatives, his name was Theodore Sedgwick, and they had just moved into the state capital from New York to Washington, D.C., its current location. And there was a vote of what should we do on Sundays. And Thomas Jefferson as vice president and Theodore Sedgwick as House of Rep passed a bill that said we are going to use the Capitol on Sundays, since in the Constitution it says we don't do anything on Sunday. We're going to use the Capitol as a church. And so for 8 years, Thomas Jefferson, as President of the United States of America, went to the Capitol building for worship services. And they would have many different Christian denominations come, and he would sit and listen and worship as President of the United States. But these are some of the things that most Americans don't know about. And I knew about these things because of Wall Builders. Wall Builders, also American Minute by Bill Farrar. But that's life-changing. And yes, there was division in Christianity. There's division in Christianity today. But John Adams talked about how what united America back then, okay? Everyone, even though that they were Christians, it doesn't mean everybody was like, yeah, I like you. There was a lot of persecution, a lot of hatred back and forth. But they came together and learned that they could agree on one thing, and that was the general principles of Christianity. It was the Gospels. It was the moral teachings of Jesus. There was a lot of discussion about the epistles and how that kind of complicated things. A lot of what Thomas Jefferson had concerns over was those later epistles, which he thought corrupted the teachings of Jesus. And we can talk about that at a later thing. But Thomas Jefferson was absolutely a biblical citizen. His most powerful argument for his belief in the Bible is when he was trying to disestablish the state-established church in Virginia. The state-established church at that time was the Anglican Church. And they would go heavy hand over those who were not Anglican. And this is where James Madison actually got a love for politics and government, because he saw the state authorities actually put into prison those who were preaching the gospel according to what they felt was true. He saw Baptists, getting imprisoned, and so He wanted to know as much as he could about the Bible and politics, and a lot of what he learned came from Thomas Jefferson. Okay, Thomas Jefferson said, "You want to learn about politics? Here you go. You're going to want to read these, several hundred books." And James Madison was critical in gathering, being a voice of unity for the states to form the Constitutional Convention. But Thomas Jefferson's biggest push for religion and religious freedom was in his famous speech called Notes of Religion. And this was before leaders in Virginia, and he used the Bible references more than at any other time that we know of. Okay, and we'll go into that later. But that's really not the main focus of this particular episode. Main focus is that Thomas Jefferson, he read through the Bible, and he would have questions about it. Now, in his letter to Carr, his nephew, this was in 1787, he talks about his interpretation of Joshua chapter 10. Because really the whole letter, this is where we get the quote, question with boldness even the existence of God, for he would rather have the homage of reason than blindfolded fear. Okay? And so even when we're reading the scriptures, we should not hold back, that we should ask the tough questions. We should challenge the text. We should wrestle with the text. We should think about it from many, many different perspectives, because we can actually get more from that. In the restoration of the gospel, this would be called proving of contraries. And Joseph Smith was a huge proponent of this. He said this. He said, "By proving contraries, truth is manifest." And a lot of people actually lose faith when they begin to question with boldness. That's a lot of the reasons why when people get into college, for example, all of the things that they've been taught from their parents get thrown out the window, because in college it's like, well, there's a different view. And so it's very hard for people to hold on to what John Adams and what the church says is both reason and revelation, or heart and mind. Sometimes in the gospel you may feel that this principle is true, it's true, but you can't necessarily explain it intellectually. For example, the lamb that was slain from before the foundation of this world. How do you explain that we won a battle in heaven when Christ hadn't yet sacrificed for sins? How did that happen? Or how did people receive forgiveness of sins before Christ actually came? Okay, so there's some things that we know are true because we feel them in our heart, but we can't necessarily put words intellectually into it. And that is what Jefferson is trying to get his nephew Peter Carr to do, is to pursue truth, to pursue boldly, because you're gonna gain more knowledge, and you're gonna be able to be stronger as a student and as an advocate for whatever principles that you are advocating for. Joshua chapter 10 that Thomas Jefferson is commenting on. He says, "The facts which are within the ordinary course of nature you will believe on the authority of the writer, as you do those of the same kind in Livy and Tacitus. The testimony of the writer weighs in their favor in one scale, and their not being against the laws of nature does not weigh against them. But those facts in the Bible which contradict the laws of nature must be examined with more care, and under a variety of faces. Here you must recur to the pretensions of the writer to inspiration from God. Examine upon what evidence his pretensions are founded, and whether that evidence is so strong as that its falsehood would be more improbable than a change of the laws of nature in the case he relates. For example, in the book of Joshua, we are told the sun stood still several hours. Were we to read that fact in Livy or Tacitus, we should class it with their showers of blood, speaking of statues, beasts. But it is said that the writer of that book, the book of Joshua, was inspired. Examine, therefore, candidly what evidence there is of his having been inspired." Examine pretensions is entitled to your inquiry because millions believe it. Okay, still talking about the Bible. On the other hand, you are astronomer enough to know how contrary it is to the law of nature that a body revolving on its axis as the earth does should have stopped, should not by that sudden stoppage have prostrated animals, trees, buildings, and should after a certain time have resumed its revolution, and that without a second general prostration. In this arrest of the earth's motion, or the evidence which affirms it, must within the law of probabilities. Okay, and then he says you will next read the New Testament. So he's encouraging him to read the Bible, and then he's commenting. He's actually interpreting the story, Joshua chapter 10, when Joshua is fighting in the Amorites, and he commands the sun to stand still. Now, according to that passage that I just read, Thomas Jefferson is interpreting it as if it is an instantaneous process. And so, yes, I would agree with Thomas Jefferson that if the earth were to immediately stop in its revolution around the sun, yeah, that everything would get flown to the side. So I would agree with that. But I don't think that's the correct interpretation. My view is would compare this to a gradual slowing down of the earth. We can look at, for example, in Exodus chapter 14. I'll go ahead and read it really quick. But this is when Moses is at the Red Sea, and you have Pharaoh and the Egyptian army coming in. And then Moses lifts up his rod, or God commands him to lift up his rod, and he begins to split the Red Sea. Now, when you think of the splitting of the Red Sea, was it an immediate process? Well, let's Exodus 14, verse 21, and here we go. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Okay, and so when Moses commanded the Red Sea to split, it was a gradual process. Okay, it says it went all that night. It took all that night for that miracle to occur. And I would say that the same thing applied in Joshua chapter 10, where the earth didn't automatically arrest itself and cause everybody to fling into the wall. It's very similar. God sometimes chooses miracles to be automatic. And sometimes it's a very gradual thing, like Naaman, the Syrian who had to dip into the Jordan River 7 times before he was healed. Or there's an example of the man, Jesus told him to put this clay on his eyes, and then he asked him, "Hey, do you see?" And he says, "Well, I see men walking as trees." And then Jesus gave that man additional instruction, and eventually he was restored to his sight in degrees. And so my interpretation of that verse would be that it was a gradual process. So yeah, now some people will question the Bible because the writers say that the sun stood still, because that's obviously not the case. The sun is already still, so the sun wouldn't be behaving any different. Why would the writers do that? And the really cool thing about the Book of Mormon is that it gives us the perspective from God's perspective, because Joshua and the children of Israel were obviously writing and recording this event from man's perspective. Okay, and that's we get that in the scriptures. We get humanity. The scriptures are a mixture of humanity and divinity. They're not perfect. That's one of the things that's different about the restoration scripture, is that God has to work with men. Joseph Smith was given revelation. It wasn't just like this easy download. Oh, I'm just going to write every word. He would be given ideas, and then he would have to clothe it with language, and he struggled with language. And there was times where he would write something and then scratch it out and then write it with something else, because it's a very difficult process. And so God, with any translation, there's going to be an approximation. Here's the Book of Mormon, Alma chapter 30, 44. And he talks about this. The scriptures are laid before thee, yea, and all things denote there is a God. Yea, even the earth, and all things that are upon the face of it, yea, and its motion, yea, and also all the planets which move in their regular form, do witness that there is a supreme creator. And then Helaman chapter 12 says, and thus according to his word the earth goeth back, and it appeareth unto man that the sun standeth still. Yea, and behold, this is so. For surely it is the earth that moveth, and not the sun. So why did Joshua, why did he write that from the perspective of man? Because that may have been the only light and knowledge that he had. Okay, and so God, that's the best that they can do. And we can see this in the Gospels as well. The apostles and the disciples didn't know very much about the mission of Christ. And they didn't know much about what was going on. But as they walked with Jesus and as they spent time with him, and it wasn't until after the resurrection that they learned more about and understood Jesus Christ's teachings. This account, the people that wrote the Bible didn't have as much knowledge as the people that came here to America. Because here in America, they were given more blessings because they had the Melchizedek priesthood. In the Old Testament, they had the Aaronic priesthood. And it's because of their rebellion at the mount in Exodus chapter 32, when they built up their golden calf, they were taken away the higher priesthood, the priesthood that gave them more knowledge and more revelation, more of the mysteries of the kingdom. The Book of Mormon authors had this. They were on a higher plane. And so that's why the Book of Mormon does such a great job of kind of explaining the why of the Bible. The Bible does a really good job of what, but the Book of Mormon does a very good job of why and then kind of how things worked. That's all I have for this episode. I did want to leave you with just one account of Thomas Jefferson, but a lot of people, like I said, question Thomas Jefferson and his Christian beliefs. So Thomas Jefferson had 6 children, and after 10 years of marriage, Thomas Jefferson's wife Martha died. Okay, just absolutely horrible. And his daughter, Thomas Jefferson's daughter Martha, record kind of the experience of that, and it was bad. He stayed up in his room for 3 weeks. Described him as having this violence of emotion. He incessantly went on horseback, but he could not deal with that death. It was absolutely just heartbreaking. And it was after that time that he was actually called as a diplomat to France. And then when he came back during his presidency in 1804, his 25-year-old daughter, Mary, or they called her Polly, was in poor health after giving birth. And so she passed away. Martha's daughter, Jefferson's granddaughter, reported his reaction to the death of Polly. And this is what she records. My mother, Martha, so this is Thomas Jefferson's oldest daughter, has told me that on the day of her sister's death, she left her father alone for some hours. He then sent for her, and she found him with the Bible in his hands. He who has been so often and so harshly accused of unbelief, he in his hour of intense affliction sought and found consolation in the sacred volume. Thomas Jefferson has been attacked even in his day and now in this day. He is often used as the clarion call for the founding fathers wanting atheism. Nothing can be farther from the truth. He loved the scriptures. He had questions about the scriptures. Like I said, he engaged. He thought about it scientifically. And he gave his counsel to his nephew and to others to read the Bible. And he loved the morality and the teachings of Jesus and thought that they were benevolent and sublime above all of the ancient philosophers. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And remember, always to stay in the ark. Have a great night, folks. J. Reuben Clark once taught, when we begin to tamper with the Constitution, we begin to tamper with the law of Zion, which God himself set up. After the flood, the Lord revealed to Noah, and the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant, which I made unto thy father Enoch, that when men should keep all my commandments, Zion should again come on the earth, the city of Enoch, which I have caught up unto myself. Let us pledge our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor in preserving our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.